If you're an international medical graduate that's thinking of going to the UK on a standard visitor visa, then this is the right video for you. Stay tuned till the end to find out how I filled out my online application form for a standard visitor visa.
What is up YouTube, Dr. Waji here and welcome to my channel where I help you achieve your dream of becoming a successful doctor in Pakistan or the UK. And I teach anatomy on the side. So if you haven't already, do subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon to stay notified of the latest videos.
Before we begin, please note that I am not an immigration expert or a lawyer. I'm just some guy that went through the process and I secured a standard visitor visa by following some basic instructions outlined on the gov.uk website. And I feel like you can too. So let's begin. First thing you gotta do is open Google and type in gov.uk. From there, go to Visas and Immigration. Then click on Visit the UK and you should be able to click on Standard Visitor Visa. Once this page opens, click on Apply from outside the UK. Now scroll down till you see a green button that says Apply Now. Click on it to start your online visa application form. It'll ask you a couple of questions. Select your preferred language. I went with English. You can go with whatever feels comfortable. Click Next. Next, it'll ask you to enter the country from which you're making your visa application. So I was making it from Pakistan, so that's what I entered. Then click Next. It's gonna ask you to select a biometric enrollment location. Check to see if one is available by clicking on this link. If it is available, then click on I've checked the available biometric locations. Then you'll receive a summary of what you can do on this visa, what you can't do on this visa. Remember, you don't need a TB test for a standard visitor visa because it's a less than 6-month visa. Next, it'll give you a short summary of how you're supposed to apply, how they're going to use your data, and then all you got to do is click on the green Start Now button to start your visa application. Next up, I'm going to show you how I filled out my application form. First thing that they asked me was to provide an email address. After that, you had travel information. So they asked me the main reason for my visit to the UK, to which I said it was business, including sports and entertainment. Once you select this, later on you'll be able to select the PLAB OSCE option from the drop-down menu. Next question was I traveling as part of an organized group? At the time, no, I wasn't. Even if you're someone that's traveling to the UK to attend an academy, made the booking as a group, do not think that this counts as an organized group because it doesn't. Will you be traveling to the UK with someone who is not your spouse or partner? At the time I wasn't, so I just wrote no. You gotta tell your own truth over here. Will you be visiting a company or organization in the UK? Okay, so a lot of people attending the academy get confused about this. The academy is not an accredited institution, and so I wrote no. Here they want to know if you are attending an accredited institution, so be careful in selecting your answer. What is the main reason for your business visit to the UK? There should be a drop-down menu that allows you to select the PLAB OSCE exam. Will you be paid for any activities over there? Absolutely not. In the last section, they asked me to provide details about the main purpose of my visit and anything else that I was planning on doing. So in the first line, I very clearly stated that my main purpose was to sit the PLAB 2 exam, which was scheduled on so-and-so date. This is just an example answer. I didn't actually write it like this. You be sure to use full forms and proper statements in your answers. And later on, I went to say that additionally, I would be attending an academy just to supplement my PLAB 2 preparation. Be specific, mention the dates, and if you're going to be spending more time in the UK studying, then mention that as well. The next section was on the travel information. So they asked me the date I plan to arrive in the UK, the date I plan to leave the UK. Remember, you should have a leaving date in mind. Next up, we had personal information, which was extremely straightforward. So your given name and family name should be mentioned clearly on your passport. Who did the email belong to? I just mentioned that it belonged to me. Did I have any other email addresses? Yes, I did. I provided their details below. Then they later asked me a couple of questions about if they wanted to contact me, which email should they use. So I just mentioned the email. Next up, they asked me a bunch of other personal questions like gender, relationship status, country of nationality. Have a valid national ID card? Yes, I did. Entered my ID card number, entered the issuing authority, the issue date, the expiry date. Do you currently hold or have ever held any other nationality or citizenship? I didn't, so I just said no to that. Next up were details about my home address in Pakistan. provided those. Now here are the two interesting questions. What is the ownership status of your home? Obviously I didn't own the home, so I just wrote that the home was in my mother's name. And the next question was, give more details about your living situation, such as who you live with and who owns the property. All I said was the property is in my mother's name and I live with my mom, dad, brother, yada yada yada. That was pretty much it. I provided my mobile phone number and I filled out the details as they applied to me. Next up were passport details, which were extremely straightforward. Again, all of these things should be mentioned on your passport very clearly. Next up, we had dependent details. So at the time, I didn't have anyone that was financially dependent on me. So I just wrote no to this question. Next up, we had parent details. So I had to fill out the details for both my father and my mother, which was pretty straightforward. Just grab one of their passports and use it to fill out all the details, although most of us probably know all this information as is. Next up, we had the employment details. So at the time I was employed, so I said yes. I mentioned the start date, mentioned my employer's name, address, telephone number, my job title. Well, I was working as a resident medical officer. Wrote down my total salary for the month, and in job details I basically described what an RMO does. So taking patient histories, examinations, rounds, and executing consultant orders, which is pretty basic. This last question is one that can be confusing for those of us working in government settings. So it asks you previous employment organizations, and it's going to give you a whole list of places you might have worked in. One option was if you'd ever served as government employees. Well, I wrote no to the answer, even though I'd worked in a public tertiary care hospital, simply because in front of that option they mentioned if you'd worked at an administrator level, and I hadn't. I just worked as a house officer. Obviously consider your own position. Be careful when you fill out these minute details. Next, we had the income and expenditures. This is an interesting topic and it's very subjective, but I'll share a few of my details. So when they asked me, do you have any other incomes and savings? I did mention yes, I had some savings. I had some money left over from my house job, and I just mentioned that in GBP. How much money are you personally planning to spend on your visit in the UK? Great question. Check out my video in the top right hand section to get an idea about how much you might be looking at spending. I have mentioned all my expenditures in the UK at the time I went for my PLAB 2 journey. If you're someone that's going to be staying between 1 and 2 months, I would say 1400 GBP would be a fair estimate, but it will ultimately depend on the level of luxury you enable for yourself. Mind you, you should have at least 3 times the amount of this figure that you mention in your bank or in your sponsor's bank. Now, this isn't a rule or anything, but this is just like a general perception, and I also followed this advice. So if you're someone that's looking to have a very extravagant stay in the UK, sure, mention more, but make sure that you have 3 times that amount in your or your sponsor's account. Next up, what is the total amount of money you spend each month? Well, here they're asking you how much money do you spend in your home country in a month. Well, at the time I really didn't have any expenses because my dad mostly paid for everything, but whatever little I did spend, I did mention as 60 GBP. Will anyone be paying towards the cost of your visit? At the time, yes, my dad was paying for mine, so I wrote that someone I know is going to be paying for the visit, mention his name, his address, and how much money will they be paying towards your visit? 1400 GBP. So they would be paying all of the money that I intended to spend. Why were they helping me to pay for my visit? Well, you can write your own answer depending on your relationship with your sponsor. I basically wrote that he was my dad, he'd always paid for my education, he was doing this to play an active role in my education and career as a supporting father. So it was my truth, you gotta tell your own. Next up, we had, did I have family in the UK? So this was a straightforward no for me. Next up, we had accommodation details. So they'll ask you, do you have an address in the UK? I did, because I had made a booking through Airbnb and I just filled out the details according to my booking. Next up, we had travel history. So those were pretty straightforward no's for me. Do fill them out according to your own past, your own experiences. Next up, we had a question if I'd ever visited the following places in the past 10 years, and surprisingly I had. So for example, I went to Switzerland and I went for the purpose of tourism around this date, and I stayed there for 4 days. So If you've gone to any of these countries, then fill out your own details. If you haven't visited, that's not an issue either. Always just be very truthful about everything you're mentioning on your visa application. Have you been to any other countries in the past 10 years? I had, so I filled out the details accordingly. Next up was one of the easier parts of the application process. Again, they're gonna ask you about any convictions, any penalties, any criminal offenses, which should be straightforward no's for all law-abiding citizens. So pretty much it was a no for me, and that was pretty much it. We entered the end of the visa application where they asked if I wanted to provide any additional information. I could. I do believe at the time I left this blank. Then they told me about what language they wanted to communicate with me in. I just wrote English, and then they gave me a list of documents that were mandatory and other documents that I should provide. Stay tuned for another video on the documents that you should provide for your PLAB 2 visa application. Hoping to come out with that one real soon. So as you can see, this was a pretty straightforward process, guys. There was nothing too twisted about it, and it didn't really take me that long to fill it out, and hopefully it won't take you too long either. Just be very careful about some of the details. I have made a video about common mistakes people make while filling out their visa application, so do check that one out in the top right hand corner here. And basically that is a wrap. Next up, I'm thinking of making a video on how to find an accommodation for a PLAB 2 candidate. If that is something that you'd be interested in watching, do comment in the section below. Let me know what you thought of this video in the section below. And like always, see you in the next one.